trip to Azerbaijan. This is my offer for you today. And to be more precise, we will follow Banine and her childhood, depicted in a book about Azerbaijan, so days in the Caucasus. Exactly this one. Yeah. So let's see together Baku and Azerbaijan 100 years ago, together with this French Azerbaijani author. So I'm ready for that. So even if for some reason you cannot read Days in the Caucasus, I do encourage you to listen to today's episode, the whole episode. I hope you will find it interesting, and I will try to tell you more about the history of Azerbaijan and even wider, I would say, about Caucasus 100 years ago, a century ago. This is the time when Banine spends her childhood in her homeland, so homeland that already does not exist. So there will be also a little bit about Georgia, so if you prefer Georgia or a little bit about Turkey, so stay tuned. Welcome to the Caucasus podcast, where we talk about literature, culture, history and more. The Caucasus podcast is brought to you by Язык Caucasus, Languages of the Caucasus. Let's get started with today's episode. So I will start maybe a little bit different with the question, what really convinced me to buy this particular book in the first place? Because it was quite a process, that's why I want to share it with you. You may already have a feeling that I'm not always very enthusiastic about books I do not know. Yes, how funny that it sounds, I know. But when I saw it for the first time, I was a little bit, I would say, afraid whether it will be a good novel or not. Or to be more precise, this is a memoir. So from time to time, I get really skeptical about books I haven't heard before about the Caucasus, because the reason why I'm so concerned whether it will be good or not, because I had quite many bad experiences with books about this region. This is other topic, but just to give you like a feeling why it is like that. So I have never heard about Banine. To be honest, I will be frank with you. I learned about her in the internet because I checked who Banine is just after reading this book. That was my plan from the start, because I knew that it is a memoir, so I didn't want to be influenced by what I will learn from Wikipedia. So that is why I wanted a little bit to have a surprise, but if you want to learn it, today I will tell you a little bit who Banine is, and just to have a glance, you can also find it on the internet as well. But what if I didn't know the author, and I read what is this book about, and what really the reason I spotted it maybe like this, it is the cover, and that it really shows the vibe and the atmosphere of the book. So that was my first impression, like from this 1001 Nights fairy tales, things like that. And it really was a little bit like it was like that. This is published by Pushkin Press, just for you to have this information. So Banine is Azerbaijani. So just to go into more detail, be more precise, she is acknowledged as French author of Azerbaijani origin. So she has left Azerbaijan and Caucasus and moved to Paris. You have already probably figured it out by this moment of this episode, and knowing the history of many families, especially wealthy families from the Russian Empire, Paris is not really shocking destination. So in the Days of the Caucasus, Banine tells us about her childhood, about growing up in early 20th century Azerbaijan, mainly Baku. She was born in 1905 in December, to be more precise. So her first years happened to be really turbulent in the Caucasus and the whole Europe, because when you look at the events of her 15 years of life before the emigration, so this is the final years of Russian Empire, the First World War, a creation of independent republics in the Caucasus. genocide, several riots in this region, and also revolution. And finally, so as a last step of her living there, that was the conquering of the Caucasus by Bolsheviks. So it is quite a lot for 15 years of your first 15 years of life, isn't it? So already that, as being a background of her childhood and her adolescence and her memoirs of that time, may be a good recommendation if you are interested in that region, despite all those tormenting events impacting, of course, her family. This French Azerbaijani author talks about it with about her childhood with warmth. We are given a chance to look at the Caucasus that no longer exists, really, via the eyes of child, observing and like step by step understanding the complexity of changes impacting her life, her surrounding, and surrounding her simply. I perceive it as a great addition to any historical book full of facts that you may read about those times. And it is worth mentioning also that you do not see the Azerbaijan from the perspective of worker or peasant, but truly wealthy family, because they have moved to Paris. It means they had the capacity to do that. She was a granddaughter of Azerbaijani billionaire, one of the richest peoples in those times in the region. So her grandfather, Musa Nagiev, he was an industrial magnate, oil magnate. We talk about Azerbaijan in late 19th century, 20th century, early 20th century. And her father, Mirza Asadulayev, businessman, politician who, besides being industrial magnate as well, was also one of the ministers in the government of independent Azerbaijan. So this already gives you a perspective, not only of the level, I would say, of wealth of Banine and the wealth that she comes from, but in her book Days of the Caucasus she also walks us through how those political and social changes of that time, of the early 20th century, impacted her family living in those conditions. So for example, one day she like traditional homeschooling and education was no longer preferred. That is the time, this is when everything is changing by the society. So she had to go to school with other children and children from different backgrounds. In the other story, she tells us what was happening to her family when Bolsheviks entered Azerbaijan and gained power, for example. One of the results was that her father was arrested, and remaining closer and more distant family members had to really embrace like new reality when they no longer were those wealthy people everyone was listening to. So why it is beneficial to read memoirs like that from the Caucasus? I do recommend reading this type of books as well, like Days in the Caucasus by Banine. Not only following and reading the historical or scientific books, and the reason for that is that authors like Banine gives you, I would say, possibility to feel and look at the human side of all the changes that were happening in that time. It's depicted the characters that we know and we get to know in this book. Those are really like real people who were living at that time, and we are no longer have no longer opportunity to talk with them because it was 100 years ago. So unfortunately there is no other way just to read the memoirs. Of course, this book shows us, let me say, like the perspective of just wealthy family who had not only huge real estates but also many servants in different places, but nevertheless this is the perspective that existed that time, and that is why it is well good to know it as well. So she walks us through her childhood, growing up, how she perceives changes, including the fact that Bolsheviks were gaining power in the region. She tells us how all those events impacted her family, her rest of life. She is no longer not only showing it from the negative perspective, she shows us the whole range of her thoughts and shows us also how it everything impacted her family. For example, what they had to do, decide, and what deals they had to take to get, for example, passports and to live happily somewhere else. For example, when Banine was just 15 years old, she had to get married as a part of such a deal to help her family. And she also sharing with us like what was her thoughts during that and how everything happened. There is something in this book also about Tbilisi and Istanbul, as I mentioned, because Banine, as a part of days in the Caucasus, spent some time in those cities as well. This is like the next stages of her journey, and for me what was quite interesting in that book is to see how Baku was different from Tbilisi, for example, that time. Yeah, that was a huge benefit of reading this particular book. So Banine is the pen author of our author. Her full name is El Banine Asadulayev. And if you want to read more about her, then not only, I would say, her memoirs, this is some pieces of information are available in the internet as well. Azerbaijani book Days in the Caucasus was written by her already when she was living in Paris. Yes, she was, so this like success story. She made it to Paris. She was encouraged by her friends. Her friends were writers as well, and they were publishing books. This is what like entourage surrounding. And there is also her other book, Parisian Days, also published by Pushkin Press. Both books are translated from French because she was writing everything in French. So if you speak French, this is also an opportunity to read that in origin, simply, not in English. I think about Parisian Days we will do an episode in future as well. So while reading this book, I understood several times also how my perception of the world and like filters that we have currently is impacting my understanding of things. For example, when Banine talks about her childhood in Azerbaijan, let's think about the territories of that time, a century ago, so not the present reality of Azerbaijan. Additionally, you should keep in mind we talk about Islam and Muslim traditions as they were present in that part of world. Her, I would say the first surprise, the surprise moment was when Banine describes the second wife of her grandfather. So I, of course, thought, okay, so the first unfortunately passed away, and therefore there is a second one. But no. Grandfather had two wives in the same time, which was possible, common, and in line with traditions of those times. You may agree, you may not agree with that, but it was how it was happening that time. So this book also gives you possibility to look further than your cultural and traditional bubbles that you are origin from. The second moment of this particular sort was when Banine was telling like a story about her cousin playing with a distant relative, a girl that was half Armenian, half Azerbaijani, and they were planning, yes, genocide, Armenian genocide. That was truly shocking for me. I had to read it like 3 or 4 times, like what happened here? And I do not want to say that I any kind support this type of action, but it was what was happening. So it gives you a perspective, like what were the people perceiving the reality in that time. That's what we learn from memoirs. This is the benefits that we have. There was another story that about this girl cousin that I would say showed me quite vividly how the education of children really evolved over those years, this century, and it was one of the most shocking parts of this particular book. I will not tell you this now, maybe it will trigger some of you, but I leave you with reading Days in the Caucasus to find out on your own. So as far as relations between Azerbaijanis and Armenians are concerned, there are several historical facts as well described in this memoir, because as you probably may know, it is quite complex topics. One of those is so-called March Days in 1918. During that time, Banine had to hide out with her family at the Armenian friend's house. That was the time when the communists, together with some of the Armenian movements, were trying to seize the power in Baku. In the context, I'd say going further, the context of Azerbaijani-Armenian relations, you may treat in this book like additional dimension, additional layer to what we have already covered in our podcast, in the Caucasus podcast, because we have an episode about the Karabakh conflict, about Azerbaijanis and Armenians minorities living together in Georgia. So this is like another adding to that topic. Okay, so this is all about the book. So to finish, I'd say, what would you say if I tell you that let's sightsee Baku together? That was the idea that I had. I will not start any tourism company, just an idea. Wouldn't it be marvelous to sightsee Baku following the path of Banine, describing in her book of Azerbaijan? This might be some sort of thank you for the author to share with us her memoirs and her memories from early Azerbaijan, so early 20th century to be more precise, in Azerbaijan. So if we have in you as watchers, as anyone who watches our podcast or listens to it, maybe you have touristic company, so I give you my idea. You can organize a trip in Baku like that, one-day tour, and that would be really great. When I'm, I would say, planning, and the moment I will go to Azerbaijan, I do plan to do that, because it will be, I would say, really interesting and fascinating even for me to see like what happened 1 century ago in those places and what is happening now. And this is what's really made me very positive about this book, and I thought I should share with you as well that this book exists. Maybe you have also never heard about Banine and her story. So that is why I hope you not only know more about this author and know more about the book itself, but also a little bit like glimpses of Azerbaijani history, or to be more precise, the history of the territories of modern Azerbaijan. So let me know, what do you think about books like that, memoirs from some time ago already, that we can read. Let us know in the comments, and let me know what do you think about the idea for the trip. Maybe you will do it on your own, then let us know that you have done it. Maybe give us some pictures that we can share with others to encourage everyone to follow that path. So to summarize, Banine, she's a French writer of Azerbaijani origin, emigrated to Paris in 1920, and she has also written the second parts of let's say, her life. This is Parisian Days, and both books were published by Pushkin Press. Available in English as far as I know, and in French I have not yet seen any other language. You know already that I'm quite skeptical from time to time about books. This one I did love, and I just realized that I have my shirt exactly connected with bicolors to this book. So I hope it will be additional like add-on to our story. Exactly like that. Thank you very much for today, for being with us in this next episode of the Caucasus podcast. If you like it, let us know by giving us a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel, and see you in the next episode of the Caucasus podcast. We are not only as a video but also audio, and we are not only on YouTube but also on our website. Remember that all the episodes, if you prefer not to just listen but to read it once again, for example, everything is as an article on our website, and the link for that you will find in the description as well. And we are on YouTube as a podcast and also in, I would say, all podcasting applications. So choose the one that you like, you prefer, and you can also listen to the Caucasus podcast. Thank you very much. See you in the next one. Bye bye.